December 16, 1944, 4:30 a.m. Over 400,000 German soldiers pour through the Ardennes forest in total silence. American radar picks up nothing. American intelligence suspects nothing. By sunrise, entire American units have been surrounded and cut off. The Germans are outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of fuel and ammunition. The war is clearly lost. So how did they do this? Here's what American commanders discovered that terrified them. Man for man, the German soldier was more effective than the American soldier. Not more fanatical, not more brutal, more professionally dangerous. Even in total defeat at Berlin, surrounded and doomed, German defenders killed over 81,000 Soviet soldiers and destroyed nearly 2,000 tanks in just 2 weeks of fighting. American veterans who fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam all said the same thing. The Germans were the hardest enemy they ever fought. Why? What you're about to discover explains why American casualties in Europe were so high in battle. It explains why battles that should have been easy, victories turned into bloodbaths, and why the U.S. military, after winning the war, later adopted the German way of fighting as its own. But first, you need to understand how soldiers were really made. Quick request before we dive in. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Last video we had viewers from 50 countries and it blew my mind. Let's beat that record. And if you want real history, hit subscribe for more. Now here's what made German soldiers so dangerous. To understand why fighting Germans was so hard, start with this question. When did German soldiers begin training for war? If you said when they enlisted, you're wrong. They started at age 10. Starting in the mid-1930s, German boys were enrolled in Hitler Youth, not as propaganda victims, but as future soldiers. By 1937, Hitler Youth had rifle schools. By 1938, 1.5 million boys were trained in marksmanship across Germany. By 1939, the German High Command directly supervised Hitler Youth field exercises. Compare that to an American soldier in 1944. Age 19, 3 to 4 months of training total. Basic training, specialty training, then deployment. But it wasn't just how long they trained. It was what they were trained to do when everything goes wrong. And that's where American soldiers discovered a problem they weren't prepared for in combat. Their training stressed obedience over initiative. American training was based on a simple idea. Learn your role, follow orders, do what your sergeant tells you, and what your officer commands. German training was built on a different question. What do you do when no one is left to give orders? Let me show you how this played out in combat, and why it got American soldiers killed. Picture this. An American infantry squad advancing through a French village. Suddenly, machine gun fire erupts from a stone building just ahead. The squad dives for cover behind a low wall. The sergeant's heart is pounding. He has 8 men pinned down. The machine gun has them locked in place. He does exactly what he was trained to do. He reaches for his radio to call his lieutenant. Lieutenant, we've got a machine gun nest, 2nd floor window. What are your orders? The lieutenant receives the call. He's 200 yards back. Can't see the building, can't assess the situation. So he radios the captain for instructions. The captain pulls out his map, studies the grid coordinates, calculates fields of fire, and decides to call in artillery. Better to use firepower than risk casualties. He makes the call. Artillery command confirms and begins calculations. They adjust firing solutions, set coordinates, load shells. 15 minutes have passed since the first burst of machine gun fire. Now picture a different village, a different day, a German squad in the same situation under fire. Machine gun fire erupts from a stone building. The German squad takes cover, but the sergeant doesn't reach for a radio. He scans the building, ground floor, 2nd floor, and spots a basement window half hidden behind weeds, dark and undefended. He signals 2 soldiers, no words, just hand gestures. You 2, left side, basement window. I'll suppress. The soldiers move instantly. They've trained for exactly this. The sergeant opens fire to pin the machine gun crew forward. 30 seconds later, the 2 soldiers reach the basement window. One pulls a stick grenade, yanks the cord, counts 2 seconds, and tosses it inside. The explosion is muffled by stone walls. Then silence. Only 3 minutes have passed. 12 minutes. That's the difference between waiting for permission and acting on initiative. Between following a chain of command and trusting a sergeant to decide. And that gap didn't happen once. It happened in every firefight and ambush. Those minutes added up. They turned into casualties. Americans waiting for orders while Germans were already flanking, repositioning, or attacking. American commanders noticed the pattern in after-action reports across entire divisions. German units with fewer men were holding against larger American forces. German squads reacted faster, adapted quicker, and kept initiative even under pressure. At first, American officers couldn't understand why this kept happening. Then they discovered the truth. This wasn't just a training difference. It was a philosophy of warfare refined over generations. The Germans had a word for it. Off-tracks tactic, mission tactics. Once understood, everything clicked. American officers told soldiers how to fight. German officers told soldiers what to accomplish. The difference sounds small, but in combat it was everything. Yet this system had one weakness. It required already skilled soldiers. By 1944, many German soldiers defending France weren't just trained professionals. They were combat veterans from the most brutal battlefield in history, the Eastern Front. More people died there than in every other WE theater combined. These were men who survived Stalingrad, Kursk, and Soviet offensives that attacked in waves. They fought in winters where frostbite killed as many as bullets, where tanks froze solid and rifles jammed from ice and snow. These men knew how to fight when everything went wrong, because on the Eastern Front everything always went wrong. Meanwhile, the average American landing at Normandy had never been shot at or seen someone die before D-Day. But here's what shocked American intelligence analysts reviewing battle reports. German effectiveness didn't decline when they began losing. In their final battles, surrounded and doomed, they became even more lethal and determined. Example 1, April 1945, Berlin. The Red Army surrounds the city with 2.5 million soldiers, over 6,000 tanks, and over 40,000 artillery pieces. German defenders, around 100,000, many old men and teenage Hitler youth. They had no air support, no reinforcements, and no chance of survival. Everyone knew the war was over. Yet in 2 weeks, those doomed defenders killed 81,116 Soviet soldiers and destroyed 1,997 Soviet tanks. Shocking Soviet commanders. That's the German army in one statistic. Losing the war but still winning individual battles. But Berlin shows German skill even in defeat. The next example shows something darker. When skill is wasted by strategic insanity. March 1944, Tarnopol, Ukraine. Hitler declares it a fortress. 4,600 German soldiers are ordered to hold it at all costs. The first commander arrives, assesses the situation, and immediately warns Hitler it's hopeless. Hitler fires him on the spot. The replacement commander tries anyway. For a month, those 4,600 soldiers hold against overwhelming Soviet attacks. When the battle ends, 4,045 are dead or wounded. Only 55 escape, a 99% casualty rate. German soldiers were professionals, but Hitler's decisions turned professional skill into suicide missions. Yet training and experience explain only half of German effectiveness. Their weapons explain the rest, and there's a myth about those weapons that needs to be destroyed. Starting with the MG42, known as Hitler's buzzsaw, it fired 200 rounds per minute. You couldn't hear individual shots, just a continuous tearing buzz. The American bar fired 500 to 600 rounds per minute. The MG42 fired twice as fast. But the real difference wasn't rate of fire, it was doctrine. German squads were built around the machine gun. Riflemen supported the MG42, American squads were built around riflemen. The bar supported them. That meant one German MG42 team produced more firepower than an entire American rifle squad. This is why small German units could hold off larger American forces. But the MG42 isn't the weapon everyone argues about. Most debates focus on tanks, especially the myth that it took 5 Shermans to kill 1 Tiger. That myth is wrong. It comes from one unreliable book, Death Traps by Belton Cooper. The real data tells a different story. A 1946 U.S. Army study of tank versus tank engagements showed Shermans had a 3.611 kill ratio against Panthers. British reports show Allied tanks inflicted more casualties than they took. In long-range frontal fights, the Shermans struggled. But American doctrine avoided fair fights. They flanked, used air support, and used tank destroyers. Tigers were rare. Most German tanks were Panzer Vs, which Shermans matched evenly. The myth that American tanks were helpless is just that, a myth. The Shermans' real advantages were reliability and numbers. For every Tiger Germany produced, America made 10 Shermans. German tanks broke down. Shermans kept moving. But even with better logistics, production, and overwhelming numbers, American soldiers still suffered heavy casualties. Why? Because American abundance created a hidden weakness, a paradox rarely understood at the time. America had the best logistics in military history, When units needed artillery, hundreds of guns fired. Air support arrived in squadrons. Replacement tanks came within days. Germany had none of this. Low fuel, low ammo, constant shortages. But that superiority made American units slower. They moved carefully, waited for supplies, and set up long support lines. German units traveled light and moved fast. You could push them back in the morning, and they'd counterattack by afternoon. In the long run, American firepower and logistics won the war. But in individual battles, German speed and initiative killed Americans. At the Battle of the Bulge, Germany committed nearly 500,000 men and lost over 100,000. Irreplaceable losses. For America, replacements were already crossing the Atlantic, but one cost of fighting Germans surprised everyone. A psychological burden unrelated to combat. January 1945 was the coldest ever recorded in Western Europe. American soldiers in the Ardennes fought two enemies, the Germans and the weather. 23,000 Americans suffered trench foot in 2 months. Wet feet and freezing cold led to rot, blackened flesh, and amputations. Germans had endured years of winter fighting on the Eastern Front. They knew how to prevent these injuries. Americans learned the hard way, while dying, and there was a deeper psychological burden that wore men down even more. One veteran said it best. What made it hard was they looked like me. Many Americans had German ancestry. Captured German soldiers often resembled American relatives. Killing them didn't feel like killing a distant enemy. That changed on December 17, 1944. Near Malmedy, Belgium, SS troops under Joachim Peiper captured 84 Americans, lined them up, and machine-gunned them. This wasn't the Wehrmacht, this was the SS, ideological killers, not soldiers. That distinction mattered. American soldiers learned quickly. The Wehrmacht fought hard but by rules. The SS were murderers. From that moment, any sympathy vanished. The war in the Ardennes became brutal, personal, and unforgiving. So if German soldiers were more effective man for man, why did they lose? Strategy. Hitler's decisions were catastrophic. The Bulge, fortress cities, no retreat orders. His strategic insanity wasted Germany's best soldiers. Logistics sealed their fate. Germany couldn't match American production. The U.S. launched one Liberty ship per day, built a bomber every hour in one factory, and produced supplies on a scale Germany couldn't dream of. Numbers mattered. America could replace losses, Germany couldn't. Every German casualty was irreplaceable. German soldiers were let down by leadership that destroyed their chances long before American troops reached Europe. American soldiers who fought Germans came away respecting them, not as Nazis but as soldiers. Many said, "You hadn't been in a real war unless you fought the Germans." Their discipline and combat skill left a permanent mark. After the war, American officers studied German doctrine. What they found changed the U.S. military forever. They adopted mission-oriented command, decentralized leadership that trusted NCOs and rewarded initiative. Modern U.S. tactics, from small unit initiative to mission-type orders, traced directly to German military philosophy. The Germans lost the war, but their doctrine shaped armies around the world for generations afterward. That's the answer. German soldiers were more effective because of training, doctrine, and brutal combat experience. But America had logistics, numbers, and strategic clarity. Quality lost to quantity, but the quality was real, and American soldiers never forgot it. They knew they faced a deadly opponent whose individual skill didn't vanish just because the war was lost. History remembers tactics, but soldiers remember who they fought and how hard it was. So here's my question for you. Knowing the 5 Shermans myth is false and seeing the real data, do you think German soldiers were truly better? Or is this just history romanticizing the losing side? Drop your thoughts below. If you learned something that changed how you see World War II, hit that like button and subscribe for more history that destroys myths and shows what actually happened. Your support helps bring real stories to light. Thanks for watching. And don't forget, history isn't just dates and battles. It's humans making impossible choices under unimaginable pressure. Understanding that is what keeps the past alive and meaningful today.